Looks like this thing's working. What's going on, you guys? We're back doing another video for you guys. Obviously, I talked to you in the last video about we're going to be doing some build tips on the RC8B4 and B4E. I wanted to go through the front end build clip. So behind me is I got everything set up to go through. I have everything laid out nicely from my tools to all the parts for the front end. Going to be going through on how I build it, some tips and tricks that I do throughout the build, and hopefully you guys follow along. If this video really helps out, please give it a thumbs up, like, and subscribe if you haven't already. That only helps out my YouTube channel and gets it out to as many people as possible. So let's get right into it, and hopefully you guys enjoy. Alrighty, so now that you see everything's laid out here, going to be starting with the chassis and the side rails. And as of course you can see, everything's kind of laid out. Going to be going through on some of the kind of the small little plastic parts that kind of stay onto the molded parts, and just kind of cleaning things off with a pair of dikes or a X-Acto blade, whatever works for you. So I'm going to be putting this together here. Make sure you have your Loctite and your proper tools. I've been liking the new J Concepts tools because it's a one piece. You don't need a bunch of tools out on their table. Since these are going into the chassis, I Loctite these. And I wanted to mention that I am using the Lunsford screws in this kit just because I've always been a fan of the Lunsford style screws that Kelly and Barb offer. It's always been a nice addition, makes your car look cool. They're a lot lighter than the traditional steel screws, and it's been something I've been using for several years. Alright, so now you got the chassis done. I'll put this to the side here. I will be going through assembling the servo saver, which we'll get into a little bit later, but we can install the servo post. That will be easy. The servo post, I do always use the steel screws. It's just steel on steel, I think, is the most safe. So I have my steel screws over here. Got 1 and 2. So and we can start the assembly process for the servo saver. So we'll put the chassis to a side for now and get out this, spread these out. Okay, so now again, just make sure that these things are all cleaned up. No burrs are left on the new of the corners here. No sharp edges of where the mold release was. Get that all cleaned off. Get your steering assembly like this. Flip this over. And in the manual it does say you can grease these. I don't really necessarily think it's a super critical thing to do, but you can put a small amount on like the triangle hex piece. But goes like that. Kind of cross corner, as you can see. And this is where you put the shims in. Then you get your spring. I don't compress this. This is something that you don't want to compress until you start putting the actual piece on. But before we do that, I do want to show you that I do Loctite this just a little bit. I've seen people glue it. I used to glue it, but it's not necessary. Put the O-ring in. And good to go. The last shim. And then voila. Then you can push this on. I use kind of I pinch this and start turning. Get that kind of started. And the setup guide and the manual, I believe, shows, we can get it out. Yeah, 1.5 millimeters. I did 1.6, 1.7 on my race car. So I get my calipers out and I kind of reverse it. Get my number. This says 1.8. It's a little bit tighter than what I normally run, so I'll back it off to 1.6, 1.7-ish, and there's obviously still plenty of room. You can kind of see when you twist it that the servo saver does still work. So that's assembled. We'll put this to a side and kind of start the next process with the bearings installed, which I have all right here. Get all these kind of out. Okay. Put the bearings in. And we have one bearing missing somewhere. And here it is. Always sometimes hiding in another bearing. So, got that figured out. Voila. Make sure they don't fall out. And then the next step is to install your steering rack. So now you need to get the steering rack bolts here. And with the new B4 style, the screws screw in from the top. So before it was assembled the other way around with the new car, the bottom bulkhead nuts or bell crank nuts bolt in from the bottom, and then 3x8 screws is what you're going to need, which we have right here. So this is going to be the right side of the car, since this is the servo saver side. Get my 2.0, Loctite. Definitely don't want to be afraid to use Loctite. Screw that on, and then we will get my 3mm wrench out and finish Loctiting these, but we'll just hand tighten them for now. Snug those down. Once everything's tight, you can actually lock it down a good amount. So, now that that's done, kind of get your chassis here, put the bearings on the sleeve. Get that good to go. Top bearings are on, and just like that, you are good to go. But before we fully install this, now that we have everything keyed in, it is nice as a little like note here. You want to put this screw in before you kind of install everything, which it shows a 3x12 screw right here. Just because when you have everything built up, the angle of screwing it in is a little, it's a slightly difficult angle to get everything screwed in. So we'll get the screws out. Three by 12 button head. Got that right there. In the manual it says to Loctite this screw, but you don't need to Loctite it until you get it past the plastic point. I do have my drill, but I'm hand tightening this one because it is a little bit of a special plastic piece. Okay, that's tight. Now you can fully put this on. Spins free, and you're good to go. So I'm gonna put the chassis to the side, and we'll start working on the next assembly. As you can see, got this set done. We're gonna start working on the diff case side, and then how I shim my ring and pinion, which we'll get into. So got the diff case right here, the cap, and then we have the set screw for the dust cover, which is right here. There's still some mold release stuff right here which I like to get cleaned up. Install that. Okay, so this is the front gearbox. In the manual and all of the pieces, the front gearbox and the rear gearbox are different, so keep an eye out on the rear gearbox. This bearing side goes down deeper into the mold. The front gearbox is angled up a little bit, so to change the front dog bone angle, and the rear one's straight. the front one is angled up. So make sure you have the front gearbox for the front and the rear gearbox for the rear. So this one's the front. Get your 2 bearings, which the new gearbox bearings are a much bigger diameter and they are phalanged for the extra safety so the bearings don't blow out like before. So the fitment is super tight and nice, which I really like. Get your ring and pinion. The Nitro Buggy and E-Buggy kit comes with the 4212 ring and pinion, which is preferred here in the States, but we still do offer the 4413 option. So get your dog bone and dog bone cup. As you notice that this car comes with dog bones, which is something that we've been running for quite some time now, and definitely an upgraded item here in the 8-scale buggy kit. One thing that I will say about the set screw that goes into the pumpkin, I like to scratch this bottom surface flat. So I have a sander. What I'll do is I'll sand this flat just to get the more surface area on the bottom of the screw going into that diff cup. So it's kind of difficult to see in the camera, but the set screw I like to sand flat or as flat as possible. So that's good for me. Get the Loctite. I Loctite the bottom and the sides just a little bit. Put that in slightly and then slide that on. And I like to just let the weight of the diff cup slide all the way down and then just hold it in place. Make sure that it doesn't spin back to back at all and it still has a good free spin. So that's good. And then we'll really crank this down. Okay. And still spins pretty free and no backlash movement. So that's good to go for me. One more check. And that's good to go. Now we'll get our front diff, which we did in an earlier video. We did 10K on the front diff. And gonna be putting that in the front. So the manual says to put start with 1 thick on the gear side and 1 thin on the pumpkin side. The way I've been building mine, it's obviously when they're brand new, it's pretty easy to check, but after you run a few times, you really want to double check your shimming. So I have my pair of calipers just to confirm which ones are which. This is a 0.2, this one's a 0.1. I'm just gonna check all these just so I can just pick them up when I need them. So 0.1, another 0.2, so that's good. We're gonna start with a 0.2 on the gear side and then a 0.1 on the pumpkin side and check that out first. So you want to make sure you're putting this in slowly so you don't bend the shims. And then put your cap on. So the cap will then go on. This spins pretty free. Check the backlash. The backlash feels really good right now. It's a little on the looser side, but that's That's also because we don't have any of the screws, top and bottom. So I'm gonna get the screws out and kind of show you what I look for. Get my drill. Make sure the clutch isn't too tight. And then I can already tell already that the one thick, one thin is already loose because there's side-to-side play, which you necessarily don't want. When you put these two screws in, it doesn't necessarily change the side-to-side play. It changes the gear mesh, which the gear mesh is on the looser side anyways, but I can already tell with the side-to-side play, it's on the loose side. So we're gonna take this out. You always want to, you always want to double check your work. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna add a 0.1 to the gear side to tighten up the gear mesh. So that will tighten up the gear mesh and take side-to-side play out. Put that back in. So it still spins pretty free. And then just for safety purposes, I always double check the shimming. I always put these two screws in, even though it's not to the bottom of the chassis. There's still plenty of threads. I will screw these on until they stop. That helps kind of clamp this down to tighten the gear mesh, just to get a more accurate reading. So now that that's clamped down, what I'll do is make sure this spins pretty free and it's pretty awesome. So the gear mesh still has some good backlash, which is okay. I think for running when it's new, this is a good starting point. The side-to-side play is a lot less than before, and I would say that this is pretty appropriate. So I have one thick, one thin on the ring gear side and one thin on the pumpkin side. And I think after you've been running for a good month or two, you can go back in and tighten the gear mesh. I would say that would be good to go. So now that that's all said and done, I'm going to take these bottom screws out because you can't have those in when you're installing the diff case. So now that that's finished, we will start installing the Amb mounts. For this car setup, I'm going to be basically building it how my recent setups have been. I'm running middle inserts all the way around. Make sure those are squeezed in all the way. Good to go. Get my screws. hand tighten them. Good to go. And then start installing the arms. So I have a couple of setup tips that I like to do with the arms. I have some tools here that an arm reamer. It's a 4mm arm reamer. This one's a Kyosho one that I bought from A-Main Hobbies. And what I like to do first is take off the mold releases on the back side. Just kind of bugs me that these are there, so I kind of like to clean them up. And what I like to double check is the arms. The arms come pretty free in the kit. I don't necessarily think you have to do this, but this is my safety feature. Kind of just cuts all the burrs off. Check both sides. Good to go. And then the hinge pin goes through. It's pretty free. So I think it would have been free no matter what if I didn't do that or not, but that's my double checking. Got the droop screws. Make sure those goes in from the bottom. Going nice and slow. Stop kind of halfway. Good to go there. And then that's all set. Get that installed. Get your shims. One shim goes behind the arm. Sometimes if there is slop, you can add a shim, but before we do that, we'll build it how it shows. One shim behind the arm. So pushing it forward towards the front. Get my other A mount. Push the middle insert through. Line the hinge pins up and squeeze it together. I can already tell that this arm has some slop in the front, so what I'll do is I'll add an insert. What I like doing is taking the upper arm shims that come in the kit. I'll take a 0.9. Hopefully you guys have spares of these. Other shims to clean up the shimming play. I like to run the 0.9 shims. We'll start cutting off the ears so they don't rub. And you probably will need more of these 0.9 shims. So I'll put a 0.9 shim in the front as well to kind of take away slop. Add your A mount insert and put your last two screws in. And kind of double check that they're tight. So you'll also see a couple times too that like this side is kind of tight and this side's kind of tight. To me, this is not good. So what we'll do is we'll take this assembly back apart. We'll take the back mount off and we'll shave down a little bit of the back mount. So you can either do that. So this measures out to 1.1, 1.1, or you can take again the upper arm inserts This is what I do all the time, and just cut the ear off. As so. On both. Install the upper arm again, or the lower arm. 0.9 in the front. You can do 0.9 in the back, but since this time we're only taking out 0.1 millimeters, put the 1 mil behind, the one insert behind the other one, and make sure that these inserts, hinge pins, are in all the way. Install the B mount again, and install the screws. And just like that, arms are free. So, and they kind of have front to backs, a little bit of front to back slop, and I'd call this pretty good. So, once that's all said and done, kind of put that to the side, get your front shock tower. And this is something that I really want to talk to you guys about. The front upper shock tower has a new style insert. There are been some breakages of this front insert style. So to compromise for that, you are able to still install the standard insert like the old car from the front of the tower. And this is what I've been running for as a compromise. This has still the strong stability as before, and you can call it a day. So you don't need to run the other insert. I recommend running it the way that I just showed you. You still install the insert from the front like the old car, and you're good to go. So we'll install the front tower, get the 4 screws. Clean that up. And then these inserts are what goes into the upper arm mount. This is the kind of the new design to help with slop and play. So this is another package of the upper arm shims, which you'll need if you used the upper arm mounts for the lower arm. And start installing these. So 0.9 shim goes behind the upper arm on both, and then you'll need a .2 millimeter for the front, .9 in the back. But before we do that, There are still some sharp edges that you want to clean off. That one looks clean. And then install the upper arm mount. So, get the screws. And those. And voila. Upper arms are free. There's no slot front to back, and that's what that new putting the insert in from the front takes away some spacing that you can do if you put them in the front side like the kit shows. And yeah, this is really nice. Everything's nice and free. That's what's really important, and you're good to go there. So the next step you'll need is the pillow balls. So I'll build one, and then we'll kind of fast forward through the next one and start the process for the next one. So what I like using is two steel balls for the bottom, and then I will get the aluminum ones for the top. So now that we got the aluminum pillow balls, these are used for the top. So one steel on the bottom, one aluminum on top. This is the left side pillow ball. So we'll install the top aluminum, bottom steel, and then you'll need to get the pillow ball cups. And you want to make sure that the motor releases are off on the sharp side, so when they fill in to the diff, or excuse me, to the pillow ball cup, it's not binding. So there's just some small plastic pieces that kind of hang on there. So we'll put the plastic cup in both sides. Pillow ball nuts. Got my pillow ball tool, and the technique to this is I like to go backwards, reverse, and you'll hear like it kind of sit into the threads. So reverse, and then it kind of keyed in, and then you go forward. So what I like doing is I like to tighten the pillow ball until it kind of like binds a little bit, and then I back it off to it kind of like drops, and then I back it off a quarter turn, and it's like a small little play. Pretty free. Good to go. Like that. Install your bearings. Voila. You got one done. Start building up the CVAs and hexes. When I'm installing the pin, I like to make sure that when I put the pin in, it's lining up to the hex pin, so everything is in line. So pin and pin, so they're not like cockeyed. So that's good to go. I'll use RM2 grease to oil them, a couple dabs right in the middle, both sides, and then that one is good to go. I'll install the set screw, a little bit of Loctite, and we're going to start building the Camber Links. So you'll need 1 and 1. As you can see, I'm using the J Concepts black fin turnbuckles. It's always kind of my go-to. That are the Lunsford ones. So I'll get your right side. Now you got your aluminum on the top. You'll need to run the shimming is the thick one, the thick insert. And that one goes on top. You don't screw these in all the way, you screw them in half. Make sure your clutch is up all the way. And then use the bottom one. You kind of go back and forth, also kind of guiding the hinge the dog bone into the out drive. So the dog bone's guided in, and it's a little challenging to get out the tool. Finish the bottom, and just like that, you're good to go. So it's guided. Good to go. So now that you have the clip kind of finished up, you have this kind of all assembled. Before you go to the final step, you want to put some black grease on your ring and pinion. I like to use a wrench. Just kind of spread it a little bit all around, and you're kind of good to go. RM2 grease is what I use. You don't need to put this in there yet. This can be installed last. So what I like to do is put this over, push that down, and we'll kind of get our last sets of screws. Loctite the top ones, 3x10 or 4x10s. And then I like to use a T-handle wrench for the top ones. That's good to go. And then the bottom screws will use steel. Get my front bumper. Three 4x20s. hand tighten the rest. And voila. Now the final step is to install the last two screws. These ones are 3x8s. Loctite them. I'm using the middle position. I think the kit says all the way forward, but I'm using middle. Oops. Make sure you have enough Loctite. And crank. Loctite. And you're good to go. So we'll kind of get that all squared away, the toe a little bit later throughout the build process, but the last step is installing the front sway bar, and kind of get that done now, and then we'll install the top parts, the wings, and go from there. So we'll get this stuff all laid out here for the sway bars, and we'll restart that process and finish up. Alright, now that you got your sway bar assembly all here, you can plug away and install the balls that go into the ball cups. Install these in. The screw goes towards the front, ball goes towards the front. So go put that in there. Have screws. That's all nicely. Nice. Install the two front button head screws, and then we'll talk about the sway bar tension. And then set screws, this is what's going to So it's gonna set the tension for the sway bar, swivel. So I like to get these started a good amount. It's still moving. Get them pretty much flush with the diff pumpkin, the diff case cap, and then we'll talk about how to set them. So this is still moving quite a bit. And now that I got it tightened, it doesn't move, and I'll loosen it until it falls, like that. And then back it off a quarter turn, and repeat the same process for the other side. Tighten it till it's tight, back it off till it falls, and quarter turn. And then you got the perfect tightness side to side. And then you then can install the leverage points. I do a 2mm gap when I'm installing it on the leverage side. And just like that, that's how you finish the front clip. Everything's nice and set right. And we'll talk about the toe throughout the end of the video and go from there. So that's pretty much the wrap of the front end clip. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the video. Hopefully it was in depth enough for you guys. I'm going to be going through the rear end at some point, the center diff, installing the radio tray. But for a lot of you guys that are currently building the car, hopefully this kind of clarifies some stuff and helps you guys get this thing built up properly. Again, I really appreciate you guys watching the video. If you give it a thumbs up, it only helps my channel out. Please subscribe if you haven't already. Hit the notification bell at the top left or right hand corner. And again, we'll see you guys on the next one.